there are these pranks that are blowing up on social media right now.
I have my own hotline for reporting illegal immigrants, and people call it thinking that it's legitimate. I talked to a kindergarten teacher that wants to deport the parents of a kindergartner at her school.
So this is the brainchild of comedian Ben Palmer, and these videos are generating millions of views and a lot of reactions. Elle Jones and Ashley Ray, they're both here to get into this with me. Elle, Ashley, welcome back to Commotion.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So, Elle, can you explain how this fake immigration hotline works?
So Ben Palmer built himself as a professional troll in the past. He's posed as Chat GPT, like an AI. He's also previously posed as Cracker Barrel, different corporations. So in this time, he set up a fake immigration tip line where people can call to report their neighbors or other people they think might be suspicious. And then he will have these conversations frequently, calling them back. And of course, this is all recorded. So that's really the gist of
the gist of it. Yeah, exactly. And then, and well, Ashley, I mean, look, you come from the comedy world. I'd love to know your first reaction when you heard these prank calls.
I think it's genius. I mean, it's one of those things that you would expect maybe The Daily Show to do back in like the 2000s. It's something that feels fresh, it's relevant, it's very easy to understand on TikTok and social media. And I think it is an important message where you're not just seeing maybe conservatives you would expect calling in, but it's across the line. There are liberals calling in saying, I want my ex-wife deported. And I think a lot of people don't know that in America, we do have an actual ICE hotline and a form you can fill out. So this is really happening. This is a real reality of people using this against their neighbors or because they have these biases they don't really even notice within themselves. And I think Ben is doing an amazing job of saying, well, why do you think Hispanic people should only, be in cities and not the country? And making people sort of question themselves.
Yeah, and it is great that he's, I guess, siphoning off some of those calls to the real ICE hotline and trapping them here. Let's actually hear one of these fake immigration calls. We're going to play a clip where Ben is posing as a snitch line employee, and he's speaking to a kindergarten teacher who called in to report the parents of one of her own students, who she believes are undocumented. So here are some excerpts from that call.
So we're looking to deport the parents and leave the child.
Right. Like I said, I don't know if they're here illegally. I just think it's odd, It's very odd.
What did you say was odd?
It's just odd for them to even be here. They seem like nice people or whatever, but I looked them up in our files, and I was like, oh, she was born in Honduras, and he's born in El Salvador. So right there, it's like, okay, maybe I'm on the right path. I'm just saying that if they're taking up resources from our county,
okay.
I'm not into illegal people being here.
And now we're going to go ahead and just remove them.
Are you questioning that, or what do you know?
Yeah. Sorry, no, I'm just writing this down for my own personal notes, and my supervisor teaches at school, wants kindergarten child's parents deported.
You make it sound terrible. You make it sound like it's terrible, but...
Oh, well, I'm just writing down what you're telling me.
Okay.
Oh, she could do terrible all by herself. Elle, I need to know, what was your first reaction when you hear that call?
Yeah, so the first thing you see is how people want to defer their own actions onto somebody else. So this reminds me very much of the Milgram experiment, which is a very famous experiment where an actor pretended to be electrically shocked, and they showed that people would continue to shock to the point of even death as long as somebody in charge of the experiment would tell them the experiment requires you continue. And so it showed that as long as people don't have to take responsibility for their own actions, they're willing to commit all kinds of cruelty. And you see this similarly here, to the point that when her own words are simply echoed back at her, she becomes offended, because what she wants to do is call the line, have somebody else deal with this, and then there's no responsibility for her actions. And it really shows us how in an authoritarian state broadly, it's made up of all these petty authoritarians that are willing to outsource this work of cruelty to other people as long as they don't have to take responsibility for it themselves.
What I also find very interesting is that she admitted to looking up the parents,
which is illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then look, I could see why these pranks are funny. I mean, certainly, there's the Ben Palmer's delivery when he's reiterating her words back to her. That is very, the comedy that is there. But I did have a hard time laughing through my fury, right? I mean, I feel like that's also the reaction a lot of people are getting. Would you say was that the same for you, Elle, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually quite similar to other pranks that have taken place. Or not even pranks. There was a woman, for example, that was calling churches and with a crying baby in the background and recording and asking if they give baby formula and exposing how so many of these churches wouldn't. So we've had a number of people actually as these kind of social experiments. So yes, this is comedy, but it's also showing us something very real about the cruelty, the inhumanity, the dehumanization that is at the heart of what makes something like ICE work, like why people want ICE. So yes, it's incredibly infuriating, but also I think the satire or the humor comes in also her inability to even confront what she herself is doing. And so that deadpan response in some ways is the only way you can meet this kind of naked cruelty.
And Ashley, I mean, look, prank calls are nothing new in comedy. I mean, you could look back at Crank Yankers or the Jerky Boys albums, and even like think of the style of Sacha Baron Cohen with his characters, like controversial characters like Ali G and Borat in these setups. But what do you think it is about Ben Palmer's kind of bit here that's not just resonating right now, but also like standing apart from everything that came before?
Yeah, this type of stuff, like Elle said, has always sort of been his MO. And I say he's someone who really figured out social media early and used that technology to prank people in just really genius ways. He was one of the first people on Facebook to pretend to be different businesses, like Cracker Barrel. He also pretended to be Home Depot when they were having, or it was Hobby Lobby when they were having issues against birth control in America. And he does it in a way where it is funny but dark. And I think in that way, it isn't just preaching to the choir. When I listen to, a kindergarten teacher saying this, it's making me angry. It, I think, riles up the choir and makes you want to do something. And then it does force people on the other side to listen to themselves. And you can't just disregard it when you know he is highlighting something that's real. Maybe his tone is funny. Maybe he's doing bits and those parts are also hilarious. But just at the heart of it, it is something that I think gets people on both sides to sort of realize maybe I did think this was just about illegal people shouldn't be here. But then they start to understand the harms that they cause when people start believing, well, how come this person in a grocery store doesn't speak English, and where that sort of snowballs. So I think that's why this has just really picked up more than maybe his past things. I think also we're at this point where a lot of content online that tries to be funny and political isn't particularly funny. And this is.
Well, I think, it is worth playing another clip of another moment from that prank call we were listening to earlier, because eventually Ben Palmer, calls this person back, says, you know what, the family you were reporting on, they're actually in the country legally. However, the caller took issue with Ben's sarcastic tone and then asked to speak to a supervisor. So here's comedian Ben Palmer now speaking to the caller as the supervisor.
Brian said we did confirm the document status of these individuals, and we're happy we were able to do that for you despite the sarcasm and the things that you're complaining about.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that they're fine folks and belong here and all that good stuff. But he was criticizing me because there was a 6-year-old boy involved. You know what I mean? But he's acting like I'm this terrible person because I'm going to deport a 6-year-old. And in fact, he goes today, because a 6-year-old would be a threat to national security.
Elle, part of the reason we played that moment is because off camera you were saying that, a big question for you that stuck with you is whether these people who are calling the fake snitch line actually feel any shame. And so what is it about that call that made you think that?
So what you actually see is, again, it's really the psychology of how people literally refuse to confront themselves. So part of what he's doing is holding up a mirror to her, and her response is to, again, victimize herself. So she's the one calling in to get a child deported, but she has to make herself the victim. So his, quote, sarcastic tone then requires her to call a manager. So this is literally the most Karen act of all time. Not only are you deporting a child, then you're let me talk to your supervisor, and then can manage to make yourself offended. And so you also get this kind of discourse of civility that we often see deployed, right? I can do whatever I want in the cruelest way possible, but any way you respond to me if that in any way makes me uncomfortable or forces me to look at myself in the mirror in any kind of way, you must be wrong. And I also want you dealt with. So not only should this child be deported, but you should be fired. So I think it really shows how, in fact, I think many of these people are incapable of shame. And when she feels that shame, she literally just has to, whatever might pass as shame for her, literally becomes, again, like deferred and projected into, can you believe he said this to me? He was being sarcastic, as though being sarcastic is the crime and not trying to get a child deported and their parents. So I think it's a real look into the psychology of people that have all the power in the world, but continue to believe that they are victimized by the least powerful people in the world, including children.
You are kind of really hitting me in my core with the way you're like, analyzing these behavioral patterns and making me think of all these other instances in our regular day lives where we see this outside of this kind of ICE moment. Ashley, I need when we're thinking about this kind of the ICE and the anti-immigration sentiment right now and what this comedy is doing against that backdrop. I mean, on the one hand, we are talking about content that some people can find entertaining or shocking or, eye-opening. And it's on content that Ben Palmer that can monetize. So, do you find that these prank immigration calls, do you find that they do help us kind of move the political discourse forward and there's some value in that? Or if not, do you think that this is kind of exploiting this current political moment for personal gain?
Yeah, I think what Elle says about these people not even really being able to feel shame because they have to victimize themselves is completely true. I don't know that these pranks are really going to convince your most MAGA Republican, Facebook friend to change their mind. But like I said, I do think it does rile up people who know this is wrong, who maybe don't know a way to get involved or don't understand the full just depth of what is happening in America right now, that these calls do have consequences. And that people, I think there are people who don't really even understand that there are people who have such issues with illegal immigrants and that it is a kindergarten teacher or just someone who owns like a 7-Eleven and how just widespread the problem is. So, I do like to believe awareness is always great and it gets people, on the right side of things. But you do also have to wonder, is he monetized on TikTok and YouTube, and where the project goes from here? Is it just we get this and then he pivots to something else when that becomes sort of the topic of the day? Or are we really going to see growth from this? Are we going to see change from it? Or, are Republicans just going to be like, hey, guys, just make sure you call the real ICE number? Mm-hmm. We'll fix that.
Right. Well, Elle, what Ashley's talking about there, it does take me back to another episode we had where you were on the show talking about a YouTube series called Surrounded on the Jubilee channel. And so, what where does this conversation about the fake immigration hotline, where does that sit with you when you consider that context as well?
Well, I think one difference here is that theoretically, because he always claims to have investigated and found out that the people that are being reported are legal, in theory, that might prevent that person from calling the actual line, right? So it's not just a confrontation with the person. In some ways, you can see it as harm reduction. I do think there is a question, and of course, this is, I think, the question, perhaps in any act of activism, creative or not, is that somebody's life, so many people's lives are at the center of any time we talk about human rights, and they're already being dehumanized. So how do we, that's the same thing with Bad Bunny's Super Bowl show. How do you both have art and creativity and comedy in a time where people's lives are on the line, and what is the appropriate response? And how do we witness things without it turning into entertainment, right? So how do we engage in seeing something and bringing it forward without dehumanizing the people who become spectacle? These are all very, very real and deep questions. But I think what we do see here is what I think is important about it, more so than the comedy, is perhaps showing how people justify themselves at all points. So the reasons people come up for, and I think politically, it shows how these political justifications always ring hollow. Oh, it's only about them stealing our resources. Well, it's only about this. It's only about that. And the starkness is laid out that it's not about that. It is fundamentally about this dehumanization. I think that's important, but we can always, obviously, if I'm sitting in an immigration detention facility, is this going to make a difference to my life? Probably not. But something, I think at this point, all forms of protest, from direct action to creative protest, are needed.
Mm-hmm. That's, so powerful, and such a great note to end it on. Thank you both so much for being here with me.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you for having us.
Elle Jones is a poet and assistant professor in the Department of Politics at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax. And Ashley Ray is a comedian and podcaster based in LA. And that's it for the podcast today. I'm Rad Simon Pillay sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion, and I'll see you tomorrow.